I'd like to do now is give you a short overview of the setup for the ETL TV analyzer from Rohde and Schwarz. The first thing that you want to do when you set up the ETL is select your input. It will automatically load up into the spectrum analyzer mode, which, as you can remember, is 500 kilohertz to 3 gigahertz. The first thing you want to do is select your input. If you have opted for the optional pre-selector in the ETL, you'll notice that you have both a 75 ohm input and a 50 ohm input. Since I'm using the 50 ohm input, the first thing that I want to do is hit the amplitude key, then hit the more soft key, and come down to input and ensure that I'm on the 50 ohms. Since I am, I'm going to go back now to digital TV analyzer settings. The first thing that I want to do is come to the mode button, highlight TV analyzer receiver, select that, come to digital TV, hit the soft key, and select the digital TV settings. Once the digital TV settings come up, I can select the standard that I'm going to be doing from the drop-down window. And as I mentioned earlier, the ETL has both the software and hardware receiver demodulators that are all options that you can configure the unit any way that you're going to be using it. So I'm going to come down to 8VSB or ATSC Mobile DTV. Select that. I'm also going to ensure whether I'm going to be using either the pilot frequency or my center frequency. I can select the drop-down window for either center frequency and then pilot frequency. Once I've done that, I know that I'm set up, and I can come in, and I notice that I right away come up with the constellation diagram, but we'll get into more on that a little bit later. The first thing that I like to look at is the spectrum analyzer, or the spectrum of my 8VSB. You'll notice at the bottom I am measuring both the lower and the upper shoulders. As long as the measurements are typically 53 to 63 dB respectively, I know that I'm within specs for the ATSC. I can also give a visual glance to make sure that my pilot is lining up on the red pilot line, and then my shoulders are within the green lines. I then can use the up arrow or the backspace to come in and look at an overview of all of the digital measurements within the ETL. As long as everything in the center column is in the green, I'm within specifications. Now I can go into the table and actually edit the table and change any of these standards, the upper or the lower, the lower limit or the upper limit, to read whatever I want. This will give me the chance to be proactive instead of reactive, so I can know when something's going wrong with my digital signal before it actually becomes a customer issue. Once I've done that, I can save it and look at all the values. Key items in here are the constellation, which is 8VSB normal, my MER, which currently I'm reading 49. As long as you're 27 dB or greater, you're within specification for the ATSC. Typically, I would assume that your transmitter will be doing in the neighborhood of 35 dB. I can also look at the BER before the Reed-Solomon and after the Reed-Solomon, and then also ensure that my MPEG packet is being modulated onto the 8VSB correctly. And if the receiver is actually locked up, you'll notice that I get the green, both DMOD and MPEG buttons in the bottom. If I was locked up but there was an MPEG problem, the MPEG would turn red. I then can come down and continue on into some modulation analysis, where I can actually see the constellation diagram as we looked at earlier. I can also select the eye diagram soft key and take a look at my eye diagram. What I'm doing here is I'm looking for the opening of the eye to make sure that the decision points are where they're supposed to be, and that there's no jitter on the signal. And as you can see, we have a pretty clean signal here. I can also adjust my symbol count either lower or higher depending on what my needs are. Continuing on with channel analysis, I'm going to select channel analysis, soft key, and I'm going to go in and actually see an echo pattern. The echo pattern will tell me, especially if I'm using it off air with an antenna, if there are any reflections in the area of the same signal. And they'll actually be listed in rank of 1, 2, 3, and so forth, and give you the level and the time that it's offset from the primary signal. I can also go into the amplitude and phase and hit the auto range soft key, and you can see that I'm doing my amplitude, which is in the gold, and the phase, which is in blue. And ideally, these will be as flat as possible. I then can go down into the measurement log. The measurement log will actually come in and measure 2 of the key parameters that I want to track over time. And I can track these from the matter of minutes all the way up to 1,000 days. I can also edit this field by hitting the configure soft key and tell it what time span that I would like to have it measure, and also what information in the input for the trace 1. So I would come down here, select the measurement that I want to do. For instance, if I wanted to do MER, and then in the trace 2, I wanted to do the packet air ratio. These automatically will come up in the bottom and are logged in there. All of the measurements that the ETL is automatically doing, once you have the record log working, it will keep all of these measurements in memory. So you can export this file to a computer CSV file format, and then do any analysis that you want to do on that. Okay, now that shows you some of the basic setups for setting up the TV analyzer from Rohde & Schwarz.